Hello, people of YouTube. We are going. This is part 1 of 3 on politically correct ministry. So, as a visual aid type thing, I am going to do just that, just for a few minutes to kind of show my point. And it's kind of hard to do ministry without some scripture backing. So, when my point in doing that is to show when it's actually really near impossible to do politically correct ministry, because whenever you're doing ministry, well, you might not know what can offend people, but if you're always thinking there's stuff that could definitely offend people, and that's the main thing you're focused on, is not offending people, it makes it really hard to do ministry and stuff like that. And something that I've learned from my own personal testimony is when there are people in your life and you think about doing ministry, sometimes with me, the people that I've thought would be most offended by my ministry when I do ministry at school are actually some of the people that are most open to what I have to say. And the main lesson that I'm trying to point out is there are a few ways of doing ministry that you can go about doing with stuff that would offend people. You can either do it in a hateful and judgmental way, that's a bad thing to do. Or you can do it in a genuinely concerned and caring, compassionate way, what is the right way of doing things. And I feel like people might be more open to it when you do it that way, because they can tell by the tone of your voice and the look on your face and stuff that the reason why you're saying things is because you genuinely care about other people and what happens to other people. And so for this video, I'm going to tell the Bible story of another person that did this, that even struggled and was hesitant to do this, kind of like how I was too at a time. And we're talking about the story of Moses. Some background information on Moses was around the time he was born, the Egyptian emperor at the time had enslaved the Israelites, and they were going to kill all the boys under 2, I think, or all the newborns and stuff in Egypt from Israel. So Moses' mom sent him away down a river in a basket and was found by the princess or the queen, and was raised as royalty. And he had a brother who, when they grew up, his brother became Pharaoh And one day when Moses was looking over the Israelite slaves, he saw one of them being whipped by an Egyptian soldier, and out of rage he accidentally killed that Egyptian soldier, so he ran off to the woods. And he came across a burning bush where God told him to go back to Egypt, talk to his brother, and tell him to set his people free, or God would release the 7 plagues. And Ramsey, his reply was he would come up with many excuses why not to, and he even brought up the fact that he had a speech impediment. So God said he would send his brother with him, and then he finally decided to return to Egypt. And after the last plague, what is still a holiday celebrated by a few religions known as Passover, and when it comes closer to time, I'll probably go more in depth to the plague closer to the times of that holiday. But the main thing is, everything generally worked out okay, even though there were some trials and rough patches. He was still successful, and God was proud of him in the end. And so it mainly depends on the delivery of saying what you're saying, and you don't really know how someone might react to ministry until you're brave enough to share it with them. And with that being said, may God be with you, and see you next time. Hello people of YouTube, Religious Fanboy here again, and this is part 2 out of 3 on politically correct ministry. Last time we talked about how doing ministry when you think it might offend people, but it doesn't always offend people. This time we're talking about that's even more of a struggle when we know stuff needs to be said, even though we know it's probably gonna offend people, and we might even get in trouble for saying what we're gonna say. And today, for the Bible stories that I'm gonna be talking about, we'll be talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the Old Testament, and Paul from the New Testament. And in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this is a few decades after what happened with Moses freeing the Israelites. And Nebuchadnezzar had taken over Israel, and when he took over Israel, he took some of the smartest youth from Israel to work for him. And for those people were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel we're going to talk about in part 3. But the story that we're talking about was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, might be more popular, known as the story of the burning furnace. What happened is Nebuchadnezzar and his advisors, they built this golden idol that would play music. And every time it played music, the law was everyone in the kingdom would have to bow down and worship the idol, or be thrown in the furnace. And when it came time for them to play the music, everyone bowed down except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Nebuchadnezzar told them many times and warned them many times about the burning furnace, and gave them many chances to bow down and worship the idol. They didn't do it one time out of all of the chances he gave them, because they knew it goes against their religion. So Nebuchadnezzar turned the furnace up as high as it possibly could, to the point where even his soldiers that were supposed to throw Nebuchadnezzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace were burning up just by walking towards it. And when they were in the furnace, they didn't get burned at all, because God actually appeared with them in the furnace and protected them. And then after that, Nebuchadnezzar saw the error of his ways, along with that time he will, and in the story we talk about Daniel in part 3. So now let's get on to the second story that we're going to talk about today, and that's in New Testament, about the Apostle Paul. And one time he was being beaten up by Roman guards, and they were going to kill him, and then the king told him to stop and gave Paul time to speak, to kind of explain himself or say sorry or something along the lines of that. But he did neither one of those things, and he used that time to share his testimony. And it even brings up in the Bible that actually in Scripture it says that he knew they were gonna kill him for saying what he was going to say, but he said it anyway out of bravery and his strength in his faith. And they did end up killing him, but something really cool that I want to point out is when they did eventually execute Paul, he wasn't sad, he wasn't mad, he didn't feel betrayed. The Bible, I believe, says that he even died with a smile on his face, because he did what God would have wanted him to do. And that is why the Apostle Paul is actually one of my main heroes, besides God and my dad. And with that, and what I want you to take from this is, even though people might persecute you, yell at you, send death threats, or any of the three, or both, or anything else because of you doing ministry, God is with you always. And with that being said, may God be with you, and see you next time. Hi, Religious Fanboy here again. We've cut in our little series about politically correct ministry. I've covered in part 1. We talked about one extreme of what could how you don't know if something's going to offend people. And in part 2 we talked about how even though stuff you may say will offend some people, and there will be consequences on earth for it, you should still say it because it's what God would want you to do. And for part 3, we're gonna talk about how sometimes when you stand up for your faith, people will possibly respect you for it, and also in some cases they might even join your cause or your religion because of how compassionate you are about it. So today the Bible character that we'll be talking about for this part is Daniel, and the story of Daniel and the lion's den. The story starts with a few of Nebuchadnezzar's royal advisors get jealous of Daniel, so they trick Nebuchadnezzar by stroking his ego to sign a law that anyone who doesn't worship Nebuchadnezzar will be fed to the lions in the lion's den. And Daniel, in reply to this, he actually goes home and prays with the window open over Israel, and he does this for 30 days and 3 times a day. And then one day the advisors find him in his house praying, and they take him to Nebuchadnezzar, and he's thrown into the lion's den. And God protects Daniel in the lion's den by, it says in the Bible that God glued the jaws shut of the lions when Daniel was in the lion's den. And then the next day, Nebuchadnezzar took Daniel out and saw that God had protected them when he saw Daniel petting the lions that morning. And in return for the treason of the advisors, Nebuchadnezzar threw them in the lion's den, and they were eaten. And after that, Nebuchadnezzar declared that the one true God that Daniel worshipped is the true God, and that people should worship the one true God, and that's how the story ends. And this is true with, like, I've had debates of my faith in school with a bunch of my friends with our conflicting beliefs, and we're still friends now. And I strongly believe that part of that is because we didn't choose not to talk about our beliefs for the sake of aggravating the other person, but we actually sat down and shared both of our stand, and we walked away from those conversations with a general respect for each other. And just remember that next time you're ever hesitant to do ministry. And from this, I hope that you take that You never know how someone's going to react to you doing ministry. So, just say it. And with that being said, may God be with you, and see you next time.